Hi, welcome to Beyond the Map, a podcast about travel, self-discovery, and the beauty found between destinations. I'm Francesca Page, and each week we'll explore the meaningful moments, mindful rituals, and hidden details that make every journey a little more human. Welcome back to Beyond the Map, the podcast where travel isn't just about the places we go, but the perspectives we gain along the way. I'm Francesca Page, and today's episode is a little different because I'm joined by someone who knows me better than just about anyone else, my partner in life, John Burhans. Now, when John isn't making an incredible dinner, being an amazing dad, or reminding me that maybe we don't need to plan another trip just yet, he's leading TradeHaus Compliance, helping businesses navigate the complex world of international trade. If you've turned on the news lately, you've probably heard one word over and over again: tariffs. It has become one of the biggest topics in the headlines, sparking conversations about rising prices, imports, exports, and how businesses are adapting to a rapidly changing global economy. But for many of us, tariffs are still a topic that feels complicated. What exactly are they? Why do they matter? And how do they impact our everyday lives? I wanted to bring John on because this conversation actually connects so closely to what we talk about here on Beyond the Map. Travel reminds us that our world is deeply connected. Every destination we visit, every product we buy, and every experience we have is part of a much bigger global story. John spends his days helping companies understand and navigate that story. So today we're breaking down what tariffs really mean, how international trade works, and why understanding the world beyond our borders gives us a greater appreciation for how connected we truly are. Let's get into that conversation. Hi, John. Welcome to Beyond the Map. I've given everyone a little bit of a brief overview of what you do, but for those people out there who don't know, tell us a little bit about yourself and what TradeHaus does.
I mean, do you want me to put them to sleep? Because that's basically what trade compliance and international trade law is. It's good to, as a nap time story. It'll put you to bed real
You got
quick.
into it for a reason, obviously.
I fell into it. I didn't actively choose it. I think that's the funny thing is that, I started out as going to school for hotel restaurant management. I fell into this role just by happenstance, I guess. I mean, there was some familial ties. My father was a logistician who managed jet engines and moving those between like GE and Pratt and Whitney and airlines. And so I kind of helped out with documentation for him every once in a while, like at JFK or Newark or so forth. But then like the actual trade compliance law aspect of it just kind of developed organically, I guess you could say. I started dealing with biomedical devices like blood serum, test assays, all this weird stuff. And then that just kind of snowballed into what I do now, which is advise on everything, from costs of imports to getting permits and dealing with documents and customs officers and FDA agents and all that weird stuff.
So for someone who doesn't understand the concept of international trade, can you put that into a nutshell of some sort?
I mean, there's so much to it, but I guess the short kind of way you can look at it is if you're traveling in between borders yourself as a person or an individual, you need a passport.
Right.
It's your document to get into those places. And so international trade of goods is very similar. You still need a document or a certification or something to transit between those borders. And so that's kind of like a really simplified version is I help manage those documents and get those for the goods.
But I remember when we first met asking you, is that kind of like you have somewhat of an attorney role, like a legal role, and you said it was more of an advisory
so I mean,
role than anything.
What I do in my day-to-day business is it is a consulting. It's a consultant or a consultancy. So we do advise. I don't hold a JD in an actual legal sense, but I'm a licensed customs broker. So that gives me legal authority to what they call transact customs business with Customs and Border Protection. So there is a legal crossover in that respect.
And now this has become, which I mentioned in the introduction, kind of a hot topic in the news with, we're going to get into talking about tariffs in a little bit. How has your industry changed given the economic shift and all of that we've been seeing in the US?
I mean, the industry is all over the map. To put it, it's beyond the map. You know, we had the first Trump administration term that came in 2018 and 2019. They put in the first round of these really broad-reaching tariffs on China specifically, and as well as, you know, steel and aluminum and raw materials like ingots and pipes and that kind of stuff. And then we had COVID, which, you know, went and through the entire actual transit, like the ships and the planes weren't there anymore. You know, there was reduced capacity. People were like scrambling to get stuff onto boats and planes to get it, you know, not only to the US, but all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, now we have the second Trump administration that has put in, you know, we've had the reciprocal tariffs, the Liberation Day tariffs, the new Section 301 tariffs that just came in. So there's, you know, the industry as a whole there's always been a underlying protectionist kind of method of the US or EU or any other country uses tariffs as protectionist practices to prevent unfair trade and so forth. But this administration certainly has weaponized that in a sense to really make it frontline, the frontline offensive tool to protect things like intellectual property or copyrights or, you know, unfair labor practices, things of that nature. So those are real issues that should be addressed. I'm just not sure that from a personal perspective, as a consumer myself, if tariffs really are the way to do it, just because it ultimately ends up increasing the household's bottom line, because we, as the recipients of the products, we're paying that.
Yeah.
Ultimately.
Yeah. Well, I mean, from a personal perspective, without knowing all the ins and outs of what goes on in your own office, I saw you get much busier this last year than you were previously, and not just because of starting your own company and all of that, but I think just, you know, the way you explained it to me was you just got a lot more work coming in.
Yeah, I mean, that's, you know, I rode the wave when I first made my consultancy firm back in 2018. I rode that wave of the first round of tariffs. And yeah, it was a big boom to business. I mean, I enjoyed it from that perspective because everybody threw up their hands going, what's the, you know, what does this mean? How much am I paying? How's this?
You're a therapist as well.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I had to talk down a lot of importers too, like off the ledge. You know, so there's certainly that aspect of it, from brokers to shipping agents and everybody else in between. Anytime there's, you know, these broad ranging actions of trade or trade compliance or tariff actions and so forth, it increases their workload because now there's all these new questions, new regulations that we need to adjust to and everything else. So,
well, you're going to love this next question.
Okay. Am I?
No. Everyone complains about their job at some point, but I think from an outsider's perspective that you do genuinely seem fascinated by what you do and the industry that you work in. And my theory on that, by the way, and I could be wrong, is that because you're constantly dealing with new and different countries, products, people, it's not a kind of like dusty continuation of the same grind every day, right? I mean, going back to like what your everyday looks like, it's unpredictable at best, but I think you like that because it keeps you motivated, would you say?
I don't know if it keeps me motivated. Sometimes I feel like I just want to curl up into a ball. I mean, it's, you know, it can be really stressful, but yeah, I like puzzles. I like, you know, solving problems, and I like understanding and learning new things. And so from that perspective, yes, the day to day, it's not I'm just going to screw in this one screw in an assembly line kind of aspect, or it's not even just a straight data entry job where I'm just typing in the numbers I'm provided. It's always okay, I've got this bison tissue that's coming from Uruguay, and what do we need to bring it into the US, and what is it for?
It's a challenge, basically.
Yeah, I mean, so
I think to that end, right, your job gives you constant challenges to solve, or constant
new challenges.
New challenges.
Different. It's not even the same challenge repetitive. It's not like we know that every time a truck crosses into Iowa, it's going to face this way station, or this hurdle that's got to go through. It's always a different aspect and a different scenario.
Yeah. And you deal with a lot of international clients and people, which is kind of cool too, because it's not, you could be talking with someone in Sydney and someone in China and someone, you know what I mean? Which I think is interesting and nice,
Yeah, well, I mean, it gives its own challenges a lot sometimes with like just
language barriers.
Well, not only language barriers, but the social dynamics or the kind of culture that people have, especially when it comes to business, right? Think about like the very stout, strong German businesses will get things done in seconds.
Yeah. Versus like the Italians are laid back.
Or I had an olive oil importer from Cyprus, and I couldn't get them on the phone for weeks, and I was just trying to get their olive oil in.
What was that company that you, a few weeks back, and it was an Italian company. You said, I've been calling and calling, and they won't pick up. And I said, they're probably like, when you call, they're on their 2-hour lunch break, then they've got their 4 o'clock break.
Well, what was hilarious is that wasn't even a company. That was so Duns and Bradstreet is like the company that certifies other companies. They basically say, okay, you're a real entity, and they assign you like a registration. It's almost like your tax ID number, your IRS number, right? So I was trying to call that company, the company in charge of basically like the entire country's companies, and they wouldn't talk to me, or they wouldn't respond back. It took forever to get a response.
But eventually they did, right?
Yeah, eventually they got back to me. So.
All right, let's talk a bit about digging into travel here. When I met you, you told me you have actually traveled to more places than I have. And when you were younger.
Yeah, I mean, if you include all the younger, like when I was 7, 8, yeah. I mean,
and then in your early 20s when you traveled around Europe, obviously. How did all of that, did it in any way lend itself to working in the industry that you're currently in? I know you talked a little about how you followed in your dad's footsteps. You had a background in hospitality. I mean, the hospitality thing doesn't link as much to what you currently do. I think the travel thing does, which is why you're here today, because to my point, you're dealing with a lot of different clients and different, different industries around the world. But how do you think that journey progressed to where you are now?
Well, first I would actually say that hospitality probably taught me a lot of soft skills in terms of dealing with people, especially if you're running your own company or selling yourself, you have to understand those kind of interpersonal relationships and understanding, both from a service provider standpoint, but also from the client's perspective as well. So I think it did lend a lot of soft skill sets to, ease into that. The travel specifically taught me how to talk to different people, especially when there's a language and cultural barrier. Right? Because you have to have this patience and understanding, not only with the subject matter, which is dense and dry and kind of stupid in a lot of senses, but also you have this language barrier and this cultural barrier where they may not do things and they don't understand why the US has to do things this way. And so
you have to be patient enough to explain it to them.
Yeah. So you have this, and then of course you pick up a few keywords here and there, and people like to be related to, especially in their own language. And I think that's important. That certainly is something I learned while I was traveling around Europe for those 6 months, was because you could be completely ignorant of what the other person is saying, but if you at least make an effort, everybody appreciates that.
Right. That makes sense. Let's go into talk. We talked a little bit about tariffs, but going a bit more into that. We said it's in the news right now. It's a major topic. Why do you think everyday people, not just business owners, should be paying attention to that topic right now?
Well, again, because they're the ones paying them ultimately. Yes, they are having some effect of bringing back manufacturing and increasing local, domestic GDP. The problem being, though, that for the majority of it, it's the John Q. public who's paying the tariffs, because those companies, they have to deal with those costs and those increases when they're bringing the products in, and they have to adjust their bottom line. But ultimately, they're not going to move their margins, right? They still want to make the same amount of profit on that product. And so they end up passing it off to the end consumer, which is just you and I and everybody else who's buying T-shirts and towels and toys and everything else for their daily life. So I disagree with them, again, as a tool from that perspective, because as a consumer, I don't like the fact that my eggs have gone up from like $3.50 to like $6 a dozen and so forth. So, the way that these tariffs are implemented and how many products are affected, that's, I think, important that people understand and pay attention to, because the price increases that we're currently seeing is compounded by the fact of, we have inflation currently and the weakening dollar back and forth, but also these tariffs have added a whole new dimension to that, which increases those.
Well, to that end, most people don't think really about the journey behind the products that they buy. So can you walk us through how something moves from being made in another country to ending up in the hands of a consumer here in the US?
I mean, there's really only two main methods, right? There's either by plane or by boat. You can think of it just, it starts in the factory over anywhere, it could be Canada, for instance. And once it's manufactured, it's packaged, it's what we call palletized, put on one of those big wood slats and put onto a truck or onto a train and then move to either an airport or a seaport. Those are your two main ways of transit.
And where does what you do come into play in all that?
So I come into play basically in all aspects of it, from soup to nuts, start to finish, cradle to grave, because I try to talk to clients during what we call NPD, or new product development, because that's where all the companies and importers need to understand everything from the testing required, the certifications. They also want to know what the current tariff rate is, because they want to calculate out what their landed cost is. That's going to affect their bottom line and what margin they can make on it. So I try to start there with them. And then, if they need documentation for the shipping, I have partners who are actually NVOs or IFFs, international freight forwarders, who would actually make the bookings on the boats or the planes and move the cargo there. And then once it arrives in the US, again, I have another high touch point to communicate with US Customs and get it actually declared, and then the taxes paid, and then to the final mile delivery.
Let's talk a bit about when you're traveling, right? Your career's given you a completely different perspective on traveling, I would imagine. And I'm asking this because has working in international trade changed the way that you experience airports, destinations, or even the products that you see around the world?
Well, I certainly think about what's going into the plane that we're on all the time. That's what I usually think about, because what passengers don't realize is that, 80% of that plane in the belly there, it's cargo. It's not your bags that's down there. That's not where the airlines make a lot of money. It's not you.
Really?
Yeah. Every passenger plane has a dedicated cargo space. And so there are goods moving under your feet every flight you take, and you don't even know.
And how are they regulated? So, is it dependent? Are there certain things that will never be in the cargo?
There are what we call hazardous materials, or hazmat goods that can only be transported by a dedicated cargo plane. But everything else, you could have a shipment of T-shirts underneath your feet in an airline that's just going from maybe Boston to Chicago, because that's how it was routed through.
But obviously there's a weight capacity too.
You'd be surprised how much those planes can carry. Yeah.
God, I never knew that. For the companies you're working with, what are some of the biggest challenges that they're navigating right now that you're seeing with imports, exports, and obviously the changing trade policies?
Well, I mean, that's the biggest challenge right now, is that we just had back on July 24th, a renewed or changed tariff, these enacted tariffs. So it changed everything. And we went from like a blanket approach to all countries everywhere to certain selected products from certain countries. And so it's thrown everything through the loop. Even the customs database system had to be updated. So it's kind of a retraining of everybody in the industry, from the regulators to all of the customs brokers and importers and everybody, to understand, okay, what are the new tariffs that we're facing?
And what do you think, like, moving forward, consumers and businesses should be paying attention to the most?
I mean, businesses have to really create robust supply chains. I think we're no longer in the era of looking for the lowest cost, and I think we're looking for more of the trusted traders in terms of countries of manufacture, because those countries, if they've shown goodwill to basically move forward with these trade practices like forced labor and IP protections and things of that nature, then those are less likely to be, hit with other additional trade barriers or new tariffs. So the supply chain is shifting, and those partnered countries should be the focus from a business perspective. From a consumer perspective, unfortunately, there isn't much, the general populace can do to affect these kind of actions other than vote. That would be the only way to and that's the whole foundation of our democracy, right? Is that we get to vote and say, okay, I don't like this, so we're going to, get something else in there. The U.S. goes through, I guess, what you could call a mini revolution every 4 years, right? We decide, okay, let's change it up a little bit. But they should be mindful that the tariffs, as a generally applied, increase your cost of living.
And it's interesting. Like, if I'd not met you, I wouldn't even know what a tariff was. I would have probably looked into it, given how much I've seen it in the news. But
it's just a tax. I mean, that's all.
It's basically what it is.
Boiled down, it's just a tax. It's a tax on any goods. It's just like you paying for sales tax for buying a candy bar or anywhere else, or the income tax, but it's applied to the goods entering the country. But at its heart, it's just a tax.
Well, this podcast is about travel.
So I've been told.
But I guess, what lesson have you learned from seeing the world that has shaped the way that you approach business, and honestly, just life in general, I would say?
Well, I mean, I think I've touched on that a lot already. I mean, it's given me a lot of perspective from patience and understanding and learning about different cultures and how people do things that are different. And that adaptability and that flexibility is good for anybody, I think, because if you can hone that skill, then you can almost like be a chameleon in any situation that you're in, right? You can understand somebody else's perspective, gives you a lot of empathy and understanding for how other people live. And so that gives you that knowledge to understand them from their core,
Well, I've always said you're very social. I know you think you're not. No, but you're good you're good with people. That's a skill. I mean, I think it's by your nature too.
I think I just have one of these weird faces. People always come up to me and start telling me the most randomest stuff.
You remember, like, when we first started dating, like, I thought it was the weirdest thing. People would just come up to you and start talking.
There was a one guy who came up to me and started telling me about how his secretary embezzled millions of dollars from him, and I was like, why are you telling me this?
Well, this is why people trust you in business.
I would hope so. I mean, I hope I've earned that trust. I try to reciprocate it, certainly.
Babe, that's like part of your role is to get people to trust you. They have to trust you, otherwise.
Yeah,
otherwise, what's the point? I mean, they're calling you up, they're emailing you, they're contacting you because they go, okay, this guy looks like I can trust him.
Yeah, I mean, that's what scares me now is that everybody's starting to trust, ChatGPT and Claude and all these other AI models.
I know, I was going to touch on that. Does how would that affect, like, AI and all this new technology? Is that affecting, or will it affect your industry at all?
Well, I mean, I certainly think it's going to affect all of the the kind of legal service industries and professionals and companies, right?
Will a robot take your job?
Eventually, yeah, it'll take my job.
Well, by that time, you'll be retired.
God willing. I mean, I don't know. The problem is that AI is advancing so quickly. So I'll give you an example. Back just 2 years ago, one of my biggest requests was always, what is the HS code, which is the tariff code, right? It determines what a product's going to be charged.
Mm-hmm.
That was my biggest request. Here's my product. What is the tariff code for this, and what am I going to pay for duty? And the answers that Claude and ChatGPT and all these other AI programs were giving just literally a year and a half ago were terrible. They couldn't understand the form and function of the product as you described it, and they would always assign an incorrect code, and you'd get a bad or...
Well, this is the same. I mean, even ChatGPT, like, it's not there yet.
No, but the last year and a half, the answers that my clients are getting from Claude and ChatGPT have become to the point where I'm basically just affirming the AI model, and I'm saying, yes, I agree with this code. This is a good classification for this problem.
But they still need a human validation. I mean, I think with anything, it's like saying I'm going to write an essay by just putting in whatever into ChatGPT, but you still have to proofread it.
Yeah, I mean, right now, to date, AI responses or legal arguments have not been accepted by any court yet, right? But the day that we actually get a ruling, whether it be from, the Ninth Circuit, the Supreme Court, Court of Appeals, any judiciary that says that we will accept a response from those AI models as, evidence for a conviction or confirmation of a hearing or anything of that nature, as soon as that occurs, then the legal profession and any other tangential little associated
will be gone.
Industries around it, there's no hope for us, because then what are we doing? Our whole point, lawyers and consultants and things like that who are in the legal or peripheral legal professions, that's all we do is we read these regulations, we interpret them, and we tell them this is what it means.
I do feel, and it's a bigger conversation, but I do feel that people still need, regardless, they need human validation. Like I don't know what that is. It's by our nature, right? It's the same way people need relationships. They could build robots and that could be your other half, but it'll never be a human.
I mean, this gets into a whole nother existential philosophical discussion about where our society is heading in general, because, the advent of technology and the adoption of technology means that we as humans are starting to more and more pull back from human connection and interpersonal relationships. And our relationships are more and more engrossed in our phones and media.
Oh, that's perfect. It's a great segue for my next question. But you know what it's going to be about.
I don't know.
And actually, my final question.
Okay.
After you spend your entire day, when you're not helping me with something, or here on my podcast,
I do know where this is going.
Being my tech manager, what is the one thing you refuse to think about? Because you're officially off the clock, A. And B, what do you do to get your mind off of it? Because you do actually have, and a lot of people don't. I tend to bring my work home in my head, but you tend to walk out of your office, despite it being in our home, and just not really think about it, unless someone's pinging your phone, which is happening more and more frequently these days.
Mm-hmm.
But you do tend to compartmentalize very well. So to that end, what do you refuse to think about, and what do you do to sort of switch off?
I don't know if I necessarily ever...
Video games.
Yes. I will play video games constantly, and it's a nice reprieve because it gives my mind something to focus on.
I don't know how it makes you more restful, though.
I don't know if it does. I think it just helps me avoid whatever problem I'm facing at the time.
So it's an avoidance technique.
Yeah, it's an avoidance technique. If I've got a problem with, like custom software or, this thing I can't wrap my head around yet, and I take a break from it, it helps to, that's what I use it for. I mean, it's a bad habit, I guess. Well, I don't consider it a bad habit, but I think it's just Listen, we can have. They've had the argument about what video games do for decades now. Go back to the
I
Reagan
think it's
era.
everything in moderation. I think it's everything in moderation. You actually don't have more than half an hour at any given time to play anything.
Yeah. Well,
So, between kids
work,
and house.
kids, house, and everything else. Yeah.
Yeah.
Redoing basements and garages
you don't.
and everything else.
Well, actually, I was going to say that's the other thing that you do tend to do to switch off.
Yeah, well, I mean, I do like construction and, working with my hands and woodworking and that kind of stuff. So
Woodworking. Whittling.
Whittling. I mean, well, at least you got to write this.
What did they call it before?
I don't know. Whistling? No, I don't. Called it something.
No, whittling. But you're not whittling. Is that what woodworking is?
Well.
And when have you last worked on wood?
The garage has been down for months. I got to replace the window, do the flashing, paint it. I got to fix the garage first, pour the concrete floor. I mean,
and then again, you have to be my tech manager.
Yeah, and that's it. I mean, I wear a lot of hats.
Well, honey, thank you for coming on the podcast.
It'll be the last time. I'm telling you.
First and the last time.
Yeah, first and last. So
but I think I at least enjoyed getting some insight because I don't think we've ever had this long of a conversation about what you do.
Because it's boring. It's terribly
It's actually interesting. And it does tie in very well with the whole concept of international trade, international travel, international anything. I mean, for the majority of Americans here, when I first came to the US, and I've said this in several of my episodes, the majority of Americans around me had never even left the state. They'd never even left their own state, never mind the country.
I mean, the hilarity of it is we have this isolationist perspective that we are between two oceans and disconnected from the world, but we have, from telecommunications to global trade, have been constantly and increasingly interconnected internationally on a global scale. And that's not going to slow down.
No, it's gradually I've seen people, I guess, have more of a broader perspective on the world since I've lived here, which is what now? 15 years?
There's a great comedian I heard who was like, you think you're in America right now? Zoom out. You're on a rock all together with everybody else hurtling through space.
Oh, that's true.
So, look at it that way.
That's true. That is true. All right, honey. Well, I won't keep you any longer. Thank you for coming on.
Breakfast time.
Yeah, let's go have some breakfast.
All right.
What I love about conversations like this is that they remind us that travel is about so much more than where we go. It's about understanding the connections that exist beyond our own borders, the people, businesses, cultures, and systems that shape the world we experience every day. Today's conversation with John was a reminder that even something like tariffs, which can feel like a distant economic issue, actually connects back to our everyday lives. From the products we use to the places we visit. One of the biggest lessons travel has taught me is that the more we understand the world around us, the more connected we feel to it. Every country, every culture, and every industry has a story of its own. And often those stories are much more connected than we realize. I hope this episode helped make a complicated topic a little easier to understand and gave you a new perspective on how global trade impacts all of us. If you enjoyed this episode of Beyond the Map, I would love for you to subscribe wherever you listen to the podcast. Follow along on YouTube, leave a review, and share this episode with someone who enjoys travel, business, or learning more about the world around us. And as always, remember, travel isn't just about collecting passport stamps. It's about collecting perspective. Thanks for listening. Thanks so much for listening to Beyond the Map. And if today's episode brought a little inspiration to your travels or just reminded you to slow down and savor the small things, I'd love for you to follow the show and leave a quick review. Until then, keep packing light, living deeply, and discovering the beauty that exists beyond the map.